Odysseus reached the shore without realizing it was meant to be an ending. The sea was calm. That alone felt wrong. For years, water had only appeared as challenge, as storm, as threat, as something to be outwitted or endured. Now it lay before him without demand. The ship came to rest against pale sand, wood scraping softly as if reluctant to wake anyone. No voices rose behind him. No god spoke. Odysseus remained seated longer than necessary, his hand resting on the worn rail where it always found its place. He waited for the familiar pull, the pressure to move, to plan, to decide. It did not come. The men looked to him. They always did. Some stood, stretching stiff limbs. Others watched the shoreline with cautious hope. "Is this it?" one of them asked. Odysseus did not answer immediately. He studied the land. It was not remarkable. No towering cliffs. No dark forests pressing inward. No signs of danger. Just a narrow stretch of coast, a line of low hills beyond it, and a stillness that did not feel like a trap. "Yes," he said finally. "We'll rest here." The word felt heavier than any order he had given before. They disembarked quietly. No celebration followed. Rest, for Odysseus, had never been a destination. It had been a pause, brief, strategic, necessary only so movement could resume. But as he stepped onto the sand, something shifted. The land did not ask to be crossed. It did not promise reward for cleverness. It simply existed. Odysseus walked a short distance away from the ship, just far enough that the sounds of water softened behind him. He realized then that he was not thinking of Ithaca, not of Penelope, not of the house that had waited too long. That absence startled him. For years, home had been the reason he endured. Now, it felt distant, not lost, but no longer urgent. He sat on a flat stone and let the quiet settle. The men watched him carefully. They were used to riddles, to tests, to sudden turns. This felt different. Odysseus felt it too. This was not confusion. It was recognition. The journey had shaped him into someone who was always moving, always choosing the next survival. The sea had trained him well, too well. And here, on a shore that asked nothing, Odysseus wondered, for the first time since Troy, whether finishing the journey would require him to unlearn everything that had kept him alive. The sun lowered slowly. No god intervened. No sign appeared. Only the quiet certainty that this place could be left, and the unfamiliar weight of choosing not to. The men expected departure by morning. They always did. Even after storms, even after loss, movement had followed. Odysseus had trained them to believe in it. So when dawn came and the ship remained where it was, unease spread quietly through the camp. No one challenged him. They had learned better than that. But Odysseus noticed the way glances lingered on the shoreline, measuring wind, reading waves, imagining what waited beyond the horizon. One man approached him as the sun climbed higher. "We could sail before nightfall," he said carefully. "The weather favors us." Odysseus nodded. "I know." The man hesitated. Then, "Why stay?" Odysseus looked past him, toward the open water. "Because I want to know what happens when I don't leave." The man said nothing. He did not understand. That was all right. Understanding had never been a requirement for obedience. But Odysseus felt the weight of the answer linger. He walked the shoreline alone, studying the habits he knew too well. Every inlet became an exit. Every calm, a delay. The sea had taught him to read danger everywhere. Here, the absence of danger felt like one. By midday, the men began repairing nets, mending cloaks, work done not out of need, but because stillness made them restless. Odysseus watched them. He realized something then. If he ordered them to sail, they would obey. If he ordered them to stay, they would endure. But neither would answer the question rising inside him. This journey, this endless motion, had been necessary. Once. Now, it felt like a reflex that no longer served him. That afternoon, a young sailor approached with careful distance. "My father told stories about you," he said. Odysseus smiled faintly. "They're rarely accurate." The boy shifted. "He said you always knew when to move on." Odysseus considered that. "I knew when I was afraid to stay," he replied. The boy frowned, unsure what to do with that. As evening settled, the shoreline remained unchanged. No threat emerged. No opportunity presented itself. The world waited. Odysseus sat again on the stone where he had rested before. The ship creaked softly behind him, as though reminding him it still existed. The habit of leaving pressed against him, urgent, familiar, convincing. And Odysseus understood then that refusing to finish the journey was not an act of rest. It was an act of defiance against the very instincts that had kept him alive. The voice reached him at dusk. Not loud, not divine, simply present. Odysseus heard it before he understood where it came from. "You will miss the wind if you wait much longer." He turned slowly. An old man stood near the edge of the low hills, a staff in one hand, a bundle of nets resting against his shoulder. He did not bow. He did not stare. He spoke as though addressing someone who had always been there. "I was not waiting for the wind," Odysseus said. The man smiled faintly. That's what men say when they're afraid to admit they no longer know what they're waiting for. Odysseus studied him. "No armor." No mark of a god. No sign of threat. "Do you live here?" Odysseus asked. "I remain here," the man replied. "There's a difference." Odysseus gestured toward the shore. "This place has no harbor," he said. "No trade. No reason to linger." The old man nodded. "And yet you have." They walked together without agreeing to do so. The land rose gently, revealing a view of the coast and the still ship below. "You've been at sea too long," the man said. Odysseus did not deny it. "The sea teaches men how to survive," the man continued, "but it does not teach them how to stop surviving." Odysseus felt the words settle uncomfortably. "I have a home," he said. "I have unfinished business." The man leaned on his staff. "Most men who pass through here say the same thing," he replied. Odysseus looked at him sharply. "Others have stayed." "Yes." "And?" The man shrugged. "Some left when the restlessness became unbearable. Some stayed until the idea of leaving felt unnecessary." Odysseus frowned. "That sounds like surrender." The man considered that. Or recovery. They reached a flat overlook where the land opened wide. From here, the horizon was visible, vast, familiar, unchanged. Odysseus felt the pull again. "You know who I am," he said. The man nodded. "Men who walk the world leave impressions," he replied. "Yours are deep. And you still speak to me as though I'm undecided." The man smiled. "That's because you are." They stood in silence for a long while. Finally, Odysseus spoke again. "If I stay," he said, "I abandon everything I fought to return to." The man shook his head gently. "No," he said. "You abandon the version of yourself that only exists while fleeing danger." Odysseus felt a flicker of anger. "You speak as though stillness is virtue." "I speak as though motion can become avoidance," the man replied calmly. Below them, the men moved about the camp, small figures against the shore. "They will follow you," the man said, "whether you leave or remain." Odysseus closed his eyes briefly. That was the truth he had been circling. Leadership did not end with arrival. It simply changed its shape. When will you leave? Odysseus asked. When the sea calls me again, the man replied. It hasn't. Odysseus looked back toward the ship. For the first time, he felt something unfamiliar. Not longing, not fear, a quiet resistance to the idea of departure, and beneath it, the unsettling sense that finishing the journey might require him to become someone he no longer recognized. The next days unfolded without decision. That, Odysseus realized, was itself a choice. The men adjusted more quickly than he expected. Tents were reinforced. Supplies were reorganized. Fishing nets were cast into shallow waters near the shore. They worked as though preparing for a long wait, even though no one had been told to expect one. Odysseus watched quietly. He had commanded armies. He had directed escapes. He had deceived gods. He had never overseen a pause. One afternoon, a dispute arose near the water. Two men argued over the use of the nets, voices low, tension tight. Odysseus approached. They fell silent at once. Don't stop, he said. They hesitated. This belongs to you, he continued. Finish it. They exchanged glances, then resumed, awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence. Odysseus stepped back. It struck him then how often his presence had replaced judgment, how frequently decisions had deferred to him not because he was right, but because he was there. That night, he walked beyond the camp. The old man was waiting, not expectantly, simply present. You've changed the place, the man said. I haven't done anything, Odysseus replied. The man smiled faintly. That's rarely true. Odysseus looked toward the sea. The men are settling, he said. That worries me. As it should, the man replied. Staying teaches different habits than leaving. Odysseus considered this. At sea, he said, hesitation is death. And on land, the man asked. Odysseus did not answer. The old man continued. Men who never stop moving forget how to choose where they belong. The words lingered. The next morning, one of the younger sailors approached Odysseus cautiously. My mother used to say home was where you stopped listening for danger, he said. Odysseus felt the weight of that thought. Do you hear danger here? He asked. The boy shook his head. Only silence. Odysseus watched him leave. Silence had never felt so loud. By the fifth day, the men no longer asked when they would sail. That frightened Odysseus more than impatience would have. He understood now that leadership did not end when movement stopped. It only became harder to see. That night, as the fire burned low, Odysseus sat alone and realized something with sudden clarity. If he stayed too long, this place would become another island. Another chapter where leaving required loss. And the journey he refused to finish would finish itself, without his consent. The sea remained calm. The shore remained quiet. And Odysseus knew the stillness he had chosen would soon demand an answer. The wind changed on the sixth morning. Not sharply, just enough to be noticed. The sails stirred where they hung slack, canvas lifting and settling like a breath drawn and released. The men noticed at once. Odysseus felt it too, that familiar tightening behind the ribs. The sea was speaking again. Several sailors gathered near the ship, hands resting on rope, eyes lifted toward the sky. We could leave today, one of them said quietly. Another nodded. The crossing would be clean. No one looked at Odysseus directly. They did not need to. He stood apart, watching the water darken slightly as the breeze strengthened. For years, this had been his signal. The moment to act before conditions changed again. Now, It felt like an interruption. The old man appeared beside him without announcement. "The sea has remembered you," he said. Odysseus exhaled slowly. "It always does." "And you?" the man asked. "Have you remembered yourself?" Odysseus did not answer. At midday, a messenger arrived from inland, a trader who had followed the coast roads and recognized the ship. He brought news. Stories already traveled. Men spoke of Odysseus resting on an unnamed shore. Some called it wisdom. Others called it delay. "The kings will ask why you linger," the trader said. "They will wonder what you are avoiding." Avoiding. The word struck sharply. That evening, the men approached Odysseus together. Not confrontational. United. "We will follow you," one of them said. "But we need to know, are we staying or are we sailing?" The fire crackled softly. Odysseus looked at them, faces shaped by years of trust, fear, and survival. He realized something then. This decision would not only shape his own return. It would decide whether these men learned how to stop moving, or whether motion remained the only answer they ever trusted. "I need time," Odysseus said. They nodded. Time, he knew, was the one thing the sea never granted willingly. That night, Odysseus walked alone to the water's edge. The wind brushed past him, familiar and insistent. The ship waited. The shore did not resist. And between them, Odysseus stood, aware that refusing to finish the journey had already changed its meaning. The delay changed the men. Not immediately. At first, they treated it as another test, a pause before movement resumed. But as days passed, their attention shifted. They spoke less of winds and currents and more of ordinary things. One man repaired a tear in his cloak that had gone unnoticed for months. Another carved a small figure from driftwood during the quiet hours of dusk. These were not signs of surrender. They were signs of learning how to remain. Odysseus observed it all. He felt pride and unease, because the men were adapting without instruction. Leadership, he realized, was loosening its grip. One afternoon, a disagreement escalated near the storage crates. Two sailors argued sharply about supplies. Odysseus approached, prepared to intervene. Then he stopped. They resolved it themselves, voices rising, then settling, until agreement emerged without his word. Odysseus felt a strange emptiness. For years, his decisions had held the ship together. Now, the ship held itself. That night, the old man spoke again. "You've taught them something valuable," he said. "I never meant to," Odysseus replied. "That's usually how the important lessons work." Odysseus stared into the fire. "If I leave now," he said, "they will follow." "Yes." "And if I stay?" "They will learn they can stand without you." The thought unsettled him. Odysseus had always believed his worth lay in guidance, in direction. But what if the greater gift was knowing when to withdraw? The next morning, a storm formed far offshore, not close enough to threaten, close enough to remind. The men watched it silently. No panique, no rush. Odysseus noticed something then. They were looking at the storm without waiting for his reaction. They had learned to read the world for themselves. That realization cut deeply. He had survived by outthinking fate. But here, fate was not an enemy. It was simply waiting. That evening, Odysseus walked the shoreline one last time before dusk. The sand was marked with footprints, some fresh, some already fading. He knelt and pressed his hand into the ground. The mark remained briefly, then softened as the tide reached it. This place would not hold him, nor would it break without him. And for the first time, Odysseus felt the weight of a truth he had never faced. Finishing the journey might not mean arriving somewhere. It might mean accepting that he was no longer required to lead every step. The wind shifted again, gentler this time, patient. The choice arrived without announcement. It did not wait for certainty. One morning, Odysseus woke to an unfamiliar sound, laughter. Not loud, unrestrained. It came from the camp, from men who no longer whispered around him. He stepped outside and saw them gathered near the water, sharing food, speaking freely. One of them noticed Odysseus and raised a hand in greeting, then returned to the conversation without pausing. The gesture struck him deeply. Respect remained. Dependence did not. Later that day, the old man approached him for the last time. "The moment has passed," he said. "What moment?" Odysseus asked. "The one we're leaving would still feel like loss." Odysseus frowned. "You speak as though the decision was made without me." The man nodded. "It was." Odysseus felt anger rise, sharp, brief. "I am their leader," he said. "And yet," the man replied calmly, "they are no longer waiting." Odysseus looked toward the ship. The sails were being checked, not hurriedly, not under command. Prepared. As possibility. "They could leave without me," Odysseus said. "Yes." The truth settled heavily. The journey had shaped them to survive without him. That had been his greatest success, and now his quiet dismissal. That evening, Odysseus addressed the men. No speech, no strategy, only honesty. "If you sail," he said, "I will not stop you." They listened. "You may leave tomorrow," he continued, "with or without me." Silence followed. Then one man spoke. "We will wait until dawn," he said. "After that, we choose." Odysseus nodded. That night, sleep did not come easily. He walked the shore as he had every night, but this time, the road behind him felt real. Not symbolic. Possible. He understood then what had truly been at stake. If he stayed, he would become a story they moved beyond. If he left, he would reclaim motion, but lose the quiet knowledge he had gained here. Dawn approached without ceremony, and Odysseus knew, whatever he chose next could not be undone. Dawn arrived without color. The sky lightened slowly, as though unsure whether it wished to become morning at all. The men gathered near the ship. No one spoke. They waited, not for command, but for clarity. Odysseus stood apart, watching the tide rise and fall against the hull. The old man was nowhere to be seen. That, too, felt deliberate. One by one, the men turned toward Odysseus. He felt no pressure in it, only readiness. "I will not sail today," Odysseus said quietly. The words did not echo. They settled. Some of the men exchanged glances. A few nodded. One stepped forward. "Then we will," he said. "We will finish the journey." Odysseus met his gaze. "I know." There was no argument, no resentment. The ship was prepared with care. Ropes were checked. Sails lifted. Odysseus helped without directing, his hands remembering motions his voice no longer claimed. When the ship was ready, the men paused once more. "You should come," one said, not pleading, not commanding. Odysseus smiled faintly. "My journey changed," he replied. "Yours did not." They understood. The ship pushed away from shore slowly, as though reluctant to break the quiet. Odysseus stood until it became a shape against the water, then a shadow, then nothing at all. The shore remained. The sea remained. For the first time, Odysseus did not feel the urge to follow. He turned inland, not toward adventure, not toward escape, toward a path that did not promise completion, only presence. Behind him, the journey continued. Ahead of him, something else began, and Odysseus, who had survived by never stopping, learned how it felt to let a story finish without him inside it. Odysseus stayed, not because he was certain, because certainty had never been the measure of a good choice. The days that followed were unlike any he had known. No schedules dictated movement. No horizon demanded attention. He woke with the light, walked when he felt the urge, rested without counting what remained undone. The land revealed itself slowly. A path led inland toward low stone dwellings half hidden among trees. People lived here, not many, not isolated, simply settled. They did not recognize him. That mattered. Odysseus helped repair a roof one afternoon. Another day, he carried water from a spring with a man who spoke little and asked nothing. No one questioned how long he would stay. No one asked where he came from. This unsettled him at first. Then, gradually, it eased something that had been tight for years. At night, he sometimes walked back to the shore. The sea was unchanged, still vast, still capable of swallowing men whole, but it no longer felt like an unanswered question. He thought of Ithaca, not with longing, with understanding. Home, he realized, was not a place you reached. It was a state you learned how to stop fleeing. One evening, he saw a ship on the horizon. Not his, not familiar. He watched it pass without calculating its course, without imagining what lay beyond it. The impulse to follow rose, then faded. That was new. The old man did not return. Odysseus suspected he never would. Some guides existed only long enough to ask the right question. Weeks passed. The seasons began to turn. And Odysseus understood something that would never make it into any song. The greatest danger he had faced was not the Cyclops, nor the sea, nor the gods' attention. It was the belief that a man must always finish what he starts. Here, on a shore that asked nothing, he learned the harder truth. Some journeys end not because they are completed, but because the one walking them no longer needs to continue. Odysseus stayed. Not because he was certain, because certainty had never been the measure of a good choice. The days that followed were unlike any he had known. No schedules dictated movement. No horizon demanded attention. He woke with the light, walked when he felt the urge, rested without counting what remained undone. The land revealed itself slowly. A path led inland toward low stone dwellings half hidden among trees. People lived here, not many, not isolated, simply settled. They did not recognize him. That mattered. Odysseus helped repair a roof one afternoon. Another day, he carried water from a spring with a man who spoke little and asked nothing. No one questioned how long he would stay. No one asked where he came from. This unsettled him at first. Then, gradually, it eased something that had been tight for years. At night, he sometimes walked back to the shore. The sea was unchanged, still vast, still capable of swallowing men whole. But it no longer felt like an unanswered question. He thought of Ithaca, not with longing, with understanding. Home, he realized, was not a place you reached. It was a state you learned how to stop fleeing. One evening, he saw a ship on the horizon. Not his, not familiar. He watched it pass without calculating its course, without imagining what lay beyond it. The impulse to follow rose, then faded. That was new. The old man did not return. Odysseus suspected he never would. Some guides existed only long enough to ask the right question. Weeks passed. The seasons began to turn. And Odysseus understood something that would never make it into any song. The greatest danger he had faced was not the Cyclops, nor the sea, nor the gods' attention. It was the belief that a man must always finish what he starts. Here, on a shore that asked nothing, he learned the harder truth. Some journeys end not because they are completed, but because the one walking them no longer needs to continue.